Greetings and salutations. Welcome to the EzeeLinux show. This is version 18.18, recorded on April the 16th, 2018, which is tax day in the United States, which means that you better have your taxes in by midnight or the IRS is going to be coming after you. And if you're watching this video after the 16th and you still ain't got your taxes in, sorry, you in a world of trouble. Okay, Linux Mint has warped my brain. Why? Because I can't use any other distribution of Linux, man. I just can't do it. I keep trying to use other things. I get attracted to all of this new shiny stuff, and I play with it for a little while, and then I go, okay, this is not going to happen. I have to go back to Linux Mint. I've gotten totally, completely hooked on Linux Mint. And in this video, I'm going to explain why. I'm going to show you why. Linux Mint catches a lot of crap from other podcasters in the Linux world. And I don't ordinarily take them up on it because Linux Mint is just not aimed at nerds. And they can point fingers and they can say, well, the code is this and it's insecure or whatever they want to say. I don't even care. Talk to the hand. You don't like it because it doesn't appeal to people who want to tinker with a computer. It appeals to people who want to sit down in front of a computer and get work done. And that is exactly what it is designed to do. It is a very stable distribution of Linux. Is it perfect? No, absolutely not. Are there things about Linux Mint that I think need improvement? Absolutely yes. But when somebody comes to me and they ask me, what distribution of Linux should I start out with? I have never used Linux before. Invariably, I tell them Linux Mint is the one to go with. Because it presents a very new user-friendly, polished, logical experience to people. And if you are trying to help people get started with Linux, Linux Mint is an excellent distribution because the way it works and the level of polish that it comes with makes it easy for you to be able to tell somebody what to do if they should run into an issue or they're trying to figure out how to do something. The reason why I decided to post this video is because I have been running Ubuntu 18.04 since the middle of February in beta. And it will be released in just a few days. And when it is released, we will do an in-depth video about it. And I've done a lot of poking at it and playing with it, and there are some things about it that are very good, and there are some things about it that I really don't like. And up on the screen is an example of stuff that I don't like. So I have a bunch of applications open here. Now this is Ubuntu with the GNOME 3 desktop, Ubuntu's little spin of GNOME 3. They don't ship a stock GNOME 3. No, they've created their own plugins like the dock over here, and they essentially turn off a lot of the regular GNOME desktop for whatever reason, and this is what you get. And I have installed a couple of, let me back up and start over. These applications that you are looking at here, Rhythmbox, which I don't have any music in here because this is a virtual machine, but you get the idea, and Nautilus, these are based on GTK3. Now, so is the calculator, but for some reason, even though I have switched to the lovely Adwaita dark theme, it doesn't show up dark. And if I install any Qt applications, these are applications that are written with the Qt, toolkit that developers use to create graphic applications. Guess what? It doesn't render properly. It defaults back to Fusion. That's what you're getting here. Any Qt application, this is what it's going to look like. It is a very inconsistent desktop experience. The settings that are available, you don't get enough of. So what if you install this and you want to change your fonts? You want to go in and choose what fonts you want. Well, it doesn't have this pop up anywhere. Now, if you go to Universal Access, you'll notice here that you can scale up the fonts, or you can turn on large text. That's all you can do. At no place in these settings does it give you any way to scale the fonts or change the fonts. So how do you get to that? Well, what you have to do is you have to install an application called Tweak. It does not come by default. And it would probably pop up if I spelled that properly. Yes, there's Tweak. So this is the GNOME Tweak application. And this is where you can change your themes. This is where you can select your fonts. And I have done that and changed the font sizes and all that good stuff. But you have to know that you have to install that. Otherwise, you're lost. So that's just a couple of things about this that really bug me. Ubuntu used to be Linux for human beings. That was their catchphrase. And now Ubuntu seems to be Linux for nerds who already understand how the desktop works and know exactly what packages they need to install and what configuration files they need to hack to get it to work. As far as the inconsistencies with the theming here, this is not a bug. It's not something they're working on. Ubuntu has shipped this way since Unity. Now, when it was Unity, there was a couple of really easy fixes. You could fix it with like one little tweak, and I never made a bunch of noise about it. But now, the GTK toolkits and the Qt toolkits, they've gone off in different directions, and there's no really easy way to do that except for basically the distribution taking the time to install the packages and setting it up in such a way that everything will render properly. So if you go to a KDE desktop, KDE Plasma, they have different settings for GTK and Qt, and you can set those up to look any way you want to, and if you choose the same themes, they match up pretty close. But you still have to know that there's two separate settings in there on KDE. So let's jump over to Linux Mint. Here's Linux Mint 18.3. And I got a bunch of applications open here I want to talk about them. First of all, there's the calculator. You notice that it goes nicely with the Mint Wide Dark theme. Here is the VirtualBox application that we saw running on Ubuntu 18.04. It renders properly. We have Rhythmbox running, and this actually has some music in it this time around. And then this application right here is the screen recorder that I'm using to make this video, simple screen recorder, and it is a Qt-based application. So if we put them, right side by side, a GTK and a Qt, you notice they are a tiny bit different. The buttons look a little bit different, just a touch, but still, this is close enough where it doesn't jump out and go, boy, that is an inconsistent, nasty mess. And if you're somebody like me who needs a dark theme because the bright themes are just hurt my eyes, opening up an application and suddenly getting this big white box on the screen is really disconcerting. So the question that comes to mind is, what's going on in Linux Mint that's not going on in Ubuntu? And that's polish. That is the fact that the Linux Mint developers have taken the time to make sure that Qt and GTK applications work. Now, you can get your Qt application, if you get past a certain Qt, like I think it's 5.7, then like if I would go and download the latest VirtualBox, this is like 5.1.30, which is in maintenance right now. If I would go get 5.2 and install it, it wouldn't render properly. But if you get the one out of the repositories, if you need to use VirtualBox, then it'll work just fine. So it's not perfect. The whole Qt and GTK thing, that's a huge issue going on in Linux anyway. What else do I want to show you here? Here's another little example of something that makes Linux Mint very cool. And once again, it's a level of polish. So we're going to open up software here. This is the software manager. And a fellow YouTube person who was commenting on this distribution, they had disparaging things to say about this. Now, I will agree that this is not the most exciting software application on the planet. And some of these recommended applications I scratch my head on. But hey, there is one thing that it does, and it does well. Let's look for a package here called lame. You see how we have the package pops right up, and if I click on it, it tells me that it is installed. Let's do exactly the same thing in Ubuntu. So we'll open up the software application. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the search for lame. And you notice what comes up. At no point does it say lame. Well, that's because lame is actually considered a dependency for other applications. And every now and again you have to go install that by itself because you might need it for an application that doesn't call on it or whatever. I'm just using it as an example. That there's a ton of those that are in here. So basically the problem that I have is that with a lot of these software type applications, these nice graphical ones, they don't give you access to everything in the repositories. Well, guess what? In Linux Mint, it does. So if I tell somebody to go look for some package that may not necessarily be something that runs on its own, but it might be a package that you need to get something else to work, they can actually get it here. So the Ubuntu distribution itself has not shipped with this particular piece of software in a long time. You can install it, but you're going to have to go get it yourself. And that's Synaptic Package Manager. Synaptic Package Manager is an awesome little tool that lets you search through every single program and library and whatever you need that is in the repositories, and you can install them. You can also choose to roll them back if you've upgraded them. You can reinstall here just with a couple of clicks. This also gives you all kinds of preferences that you can set. It's a very direct and easy graphic application to deal with packages. No, it's not as fancy as the software applications, like the big graphic things and the App Store looking things. No, it's not. But it is very functional. And for anybody who has just a bit of experience with Linux, I think that they would gravitate toward that. Another application that comes installed by default in Linux Mint, since we're dealing with software, is one called GDebi. This is not shipped by default with Ubuntu. So if I open up downloads and I go into packages, I got some deb packages in here. And if I click on this deb package, you notice this little box comes up. Well, this is GDebi, and it is a package installer for Debian-based Linux. And you can also use it from a command line. And yes, I do know that you can use dpkg, but GDebi is a little bit slicker from the command line, and it will resolve dependencies. I think it does a better job of it than dpkg. That's for anybody who would say, well, you can use dpkg. Well, I like this better. So this is what it looks like, and it's just a really cute little application. And if you haven't installed the package, then it will give you the chance to install it. It'll also show you what dependencies you need, and if you should happen to download a deb package that is not compatible with whatever you're running, it will tell you. So it's a very cool little application. Comes by default in Linux Mint. Polish. Let's take a look at the settings in Linux Mint. Okay, so one of my biggest complaints with a lot of stripped down desktops, GNOME, Pantheon, and Elementary, and many others, is that you just don't get settings that make sense. And especially in the case of GNOME these days, you have to know you're going to have to install the tweak tool. You may have to go get other applications to do that kind of stuff. Well, guess what? In Linux Mint, it's all laid out. It's not quite as intense as a KDE Plasma experience settings-wise, but at the same time, it offers more than like a GNOME experience. And of course, if you're familiar with XFCE and Mate, then you know there's excellent settings in there too. So, fonts. Just click on it. Here, choose the fonts you want. Put the scaling that you want on it. No problem. Taken care of. Themes in Linux Mint. Well, let's open it up here. You notice that we can just choose any theme that we like. We can choose any icon set that is installed on the system. Very simple and easy and straightforward to use. And I've got Mint Y Dark on here, and I've got icons called Gnome's Colors Common. That's what they're called. And if I want more, I'll just click over here, and then I can choose other themes to look at and all that other stuff. You want to play with that, go right ahead. I never get too deeply into that. I'm kind of happy with what ships. But it's super easy to change. It's no big deal. It was in Ubuntu with Unity, they would allow you to ship, change basic GTK themes that were shipped with it. Whereas in GNOME, there's no way to do it unless you install that. It's a step back, guys. It really, really is. So another thing that Linux Mint does that I want to touch on really quick is when they started out with Linux Mint 18, they did something that caused a bit of a controversy. They decided to fork several applications from the GNOME project and kind of develop them in their own way. And the reason why they did that was because GNOME was going to what's called client-side decorations, which means that instead of having a menu up top, that you have something I want to show you from here too. But let me go over here and grab the text editor. See, the problem is that I'm doing this and it's actually right behind the microphone. This is their text editor called Xed, and it is a really groovy application that I use all the time to write scripts because it does a bunch of things that a bunch of other text editors do, but you have to install a bunch of plugins to get it to work. Xed, they've already gone through and figured out most of the really cool stuff that you're going to need, and it works just fine. So, for instance, if I want to work on this text file here, this is my notes from the last video, you'll notice that I have line numbers. I also can wrap the text. I can zoom the text in and out. This is a wonderful text editor. It is based on Pluma, which is the text editor that comes with the Mate desktop. But they've tweaked it up. They've made it their own, and they've done that with a bunch of other applications. They also have another one called Pix that you can use to work with pictures. That is pretty awesome. And the Pix application is essentially the one that has shipped with GNOME for a long time, GThumb. But they forked it, and they've kept a more traditional interface with menus and buttons that are more logically labeled than what comes with GNOME these days. Another thing that I want to show you guys is I'm opening up a LibreOffice document, and we're going to type in one word. So I typed in the word flawless, right? Now, if I right-click on this, I have synonyms that pop up. Not many for flawless, but a few. And this is something that I use all the time. Plus the spell checker, because I have a terrible time with typos and spelling, so I need all the help I can get. In other distributions of Linux, not Ubuntu comes shipped with all of this working, so we're not getting on Ubuntu's case. But in other distributions that I have tried, when you install LibreOffice, none of this works because not all of the packages are there. So to get the synonyms to work, you need a package called mythes installed, which is a thesaurus. It doesn't necessarily install automatically with LibreOffice. In Linux Mint, all of that is set up for you. It's already there. And it's like that with many other applications as well that ship with the distribution. So, it's awesome. Now, I was talking about client-side decorations, and what does that mean? Well, let's take a look here at Rhythmbox, and you'll see that we have a menu bar up top, and then we have menus here. Client-side decorations are where the program itself provides buttons in this top bar and ignores the window manager. So if I look over here at Nautilus, you'll notice that that's going on. And I think this is actually a cool thing. But the Linux Mint folks, they saw that there's some potential issues here. This doesn't really tell you a lot about what it's doing since you don't get the menus. In GNOME, sometimes you get a menu up here, sometimes you don't. It depends on the application and how much support there is for it. Let me get out of that. I want to see if I have any kind of a menu. Yeah, I got one here. Let's see if it works with that. See, it doesn't work there. So they changed the way that works and tried to move all the menus up there in GNOME 3. It's been like this for years, I know, but there's a lot of new people watching the video, okay, gang? So let me see if this thing is actually going to let me out so I can go over to the other side. So if we look at Rhythmbox here, we've got regular menus and stuff like that. The calculator has client-side decorations. The main thing here that I'm trying to get across is polish as far as Linux Mint is concerned. It is a very polished, very familiar distribution of Linux, and it does what I need it to do, and it works, and it is just absolutely amazing. And so what I'm doing now is every time that I look at another distribution of Linux, what am I doing? I'm comparing it to Linux Mint. And Linux Mint has this wonderful, polished, got itself together presentation, and then you go to other distributions that everybody's saying are great, and it's not. The KDE desktop, you can get to do this. You can tweak it to make it work this way, and it's probably the only other desktop besides the Cinnamon with 18 on Linux Mint 18.3 that you can get this look and feel to. It really is. All of the other desktops, maybe the Mate desktop, especially Ubuntu Mate or Mint's Ubuntu, Mint's Mate distribution, you could probably do it. So, anyhow, gang, I just had to post this video, and this is for people. I want to be able to point this to people who are starting out so they can see why I consider Linux Mint to be the distribution to start with. We're going to talk a lot more about Ubuntu 18.04. This, of course, is not the final. They may do some more tweaking on this, but when 18.04, the official release, comes out, I will install it, and we will go through it with a fine-tooth comb. I've been using it for quite some time already, but you never know. The last day, they might come up with some new stuff, so I'm not going to get too much into it until then. Now, thank you for watching this video, and I look forward to reading your comments. Please be sure to give EzeeLinux a like on Facebook, that is if you're still using Facebook. Also, check out EzeeLinux.com. That's sort of a central place that you can go look for all things having to do with the EzeeLinux project, and you can contact me directly through the contact page there. And also check out freedompenguin.com for more info about Linux. We'll do it again soon.